Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something really cool. We aren't just blowing the dust off some old texts. We are actually building a time traveler's toolkit. We're going to decode the past and, find the real, beating human heart tucked inside ancient Japanese literary culture. So, let's get ready to travel through time.
Now, you might be wondering, why even bother studying dead words? Like, why put ourselves through old grammar, confusing rules, and a language nobody speaks anymore? Honestly, it's a totally fair question. A lot of us just remember old literature as this really painful exercise in rote memorization. But what if I told you there's actually a completely different way to look at it? Think about the typical high school test. It's all about grammar, memorizing forms, rigid rules. But the human reality beneath those texts, it's love. It's loneliness, ambition, grief. The grammar rules and historical spellings aren't just obstacles thrown in your way to make it hard. They're actually bridges. They are literally the exact tools we need to cross over and experience those universal human emotions. Which brings us to the absolute core of our journey today. The language is old, for sure, but the emotions? They're not. I mean, think about it. People way back in the 11th century kept letters they just couldn't bear to throw away. It's exactly the same way we refuse to delete old text messages from someone we care about today. The technology completely changed, but that feeling of longing hasn't changed a bit. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's the roadmap for building our toolkit. Words across time, cracking classical Japanese, reading the unsaid, the power of short poetry, and finally, Kanbun, decoding ancient wisdom.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Words Across Time.
It's so vital to realize that language isn't just chopped up into these unrelated historical boxes. As the saying beautifully puts it, every person lives inside language. We think with words, remember with words, comfort others with words. These ancient texts form a continuous cultural memory. So whether it's a courtier waiting for a letter 1,000 years ago, or you admiring the moon last night, we use words to give shape to the exact same human feelings.
Moving right along to Section 2, Cracking Classical Japanese.
Now this is where we get to put on our detective hats. What's really interesting here is how a single word, like aware, completely changes depending on its context. You literally can't just translate it as one single thing. It's about deep emotional movement. Someone might feel aware when looking at a stunningly beautiful moon, or maybe when sensing the bittersweet passing of time. It's just a highly efficient vehicle for capturing really deep emotional resonance.
Now, contrast that with okashi. If aware is deep and moving, okashi is much lighter. It's more of an intellectual pleasure in something you notice. It's charming, bright, sharply observant. By learning just these two concepts, you start to see that classical words aren't just dry vocabulary you have to memorize. They're actually distinct emotional shades to paint the world.
So, to truly crack the code, we need to use our classical toolkit. First up, we've got honorifics. And these aren't just about having polite manners, they actually reveal exactly who is speaking to whom, instantly defining social rank. Next, omitted subjects. Now these are not mistakes. They demand that you, the reader, actively infer who is acting based on the context. You have to work for it. And finally, kakari musubi. This changes sentence endings for emphasis or questions. Think of it not as a dry rule, but as a literal spotlight. The author shines on a specific feeling or question, telling you exactly what to pay attention to.
All right, Section 3, Reading the Unsaid.
When we shift gears to reading prose and essays, the real magic lies in reading between the lines. An essay usually moves from a really simple event, like just noticing a thin crack in an old mug, to a profound awareness, like the sudden realization that time changes things quietly, day by day. You aren't just reading what happened, right? You're literally watching the writer's mind discover a truth about the world through a simple, concrete detail.
Which leads us to Section 4, The Power of Short Poetry.
In Japanese literary culture, short poetry doesn't try to explain everything to you. 31. That is the exact number of sound syllables in a classic waka or tanka. 57577. It's this tiny, incredibly compact vessel, but because of those strict limits, every single word carries immense weight. It allows this incredibly small structure to hold a remarkably wide emotional sky.
So, the crucial point is how they achieve this compression. They use some truly fascinating techniques. First, there's kakekatoba, or pivot words, where one sound carries two meanings. This instantly links a nature scene with an inner emotion. Then they use engo, which are associated words that build and unify the atmosphere. And most importantly,
Yojo. This is that deliberate, lingering feeling left in the silence after the poem ends.
Let's look at this in action. In the library, a pale moon fills the window. Before I leave, the book I could not finish waits with a folded page. The poem ends, but the feeling definitely doesn't. That folded page leaves a profound sense of Yojo. It's this unresolved, open moment of hesitation that just echoes in your mind long after the words stop. And honestly, that is the true power of the unsaid.
And finally, Section 5, Kanbun, Decoding Ancient Wisdom.
So Kanbun might look highly technical at first glance, but it's actually this fascinating mechanic for cross-cultural reading. It raises a really surprising question. How do you read a completely different language without fully translating the words into a new text? Sounds impossible, right? Well, this is exactly the brilliance of how Japanese scholars approached classical Chinese texts.
The answer is kundoku. It's a method of reading Chinese-based texts using Japanese order and style, without just wiping out the original text with a translation. Think of kundoku like a bridge. It allows readers to interact with the original structure and the raw force of Chinese philosophy, politics, and storytelling, all while making it perfectly readable in Japanese. It's a real game changer.
Let's move to and see how this builds through 3 distinct steps. First, you follow reading marks, like the return mark, which guide your eye to the correct word order. Second, you handle rereading characters, which you literally read twice to extract their full grammatical meaning. And third, you recognize okaji. These are silent placed characters. They aren't actually spoken out loud, but they act exactly like stage lighting in a theater. You don't look directly at the lights, but they entirely shape the mood and tone of the whole scene.
Once you know the marks, you start looking for fixed sentence patterns, like negation, causation, or rhetorical questions. Identifying these instantly reveals the writer's core argument. For example, in Kanbun, a rhetorical question acts like a hammer, striking a moral or philosophical point into place. When a writer asks, "How could this be right?" they are definitely not looking for an answer. They're commanding you to see that it is absolutely wrong. It's literally grammar as persuasion.
Which brings us completely full circle. Language connects people who never meet. By using this toolkit, by reading the unsaid, feeling the compression of poetry, and decoding the wisdom of Kanbun, we aren't just staring at the past. We are actively keeping human experiences alive in the present. We're touching the minds of people we will literally never meet, but who felt the exact same things we do today.
Because you are a participant in this continuous river of language. So as you go about your day, writing your texts, your emails, your journal entries, ask yourself, what forgotten emotions will your words carry into the future? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep decoding, and I'll see you next time.